Hello and welcome to That Deacon on YouTube. This month we pick up where we left off last month as I have an in-depth conversation with Deacon Ed Schnezinski talking about spiritual direction. And I hope you're finding out that spiritual direction is more than just sharing your relationship with God. There is much more to this art than people might realize. This month we pick up our conversation when Ed is talking about how spiritual direction helped see him through some very difficult times, which worked in tandem with a psychologist. So let's pick up the conversation and I'll see you at the very end.
I was diagnosed with clinical depression. I switched the psychologist that I was working with. I wanted somebody who knew I wanted a different voice, and I knew it needed to be a woman because I truly believe in what I call mommy magic, the healing power of women, and that was important. And I needed to be with someone who wasn't going to let me sort of BS myself. And I had a really good spiritual director, and that's where I wanted to go with this at the time. And what we did was we spent a lot of time talking about family systems and did a lot of inner child work. Because if I was going to embrace my humanity and understand who I was, I had to deal with my self-esteem issues, which I knew they came early on from adoption. But I needed to talk to little Eddie because I know that when Big Eddie is driving the bus, everything is fine. When little Eddie is driving the bus, all hell breaks loose. So I needed to learn how to talk to little Eddie and comfort little Eddie.
Yeah.
So again, another part of that whole piece of healing and becoming whole, and that was an important time in my life. That and working with my sponsor and my therapist, all of these kinds of things were all positive things in my life. What gets in the way of becoming fully human for most people? Fear. I think we're all afraid of what's going to happen if I become that vulnerable to myself. I might be willing to be that vulnerable to God, but my experience tells me that most of us really aren't. Don't want to be vulnerable to God. We want to appear that we're wonderful and we're good little children, and that doesn't matter to God. I don't think. I think God knows what we are. So fear. So that takes me to another great book that I recommend to people to read. And this one I've given copies, a lot of them away. Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh. Really, the whole Buddhist approach to understanding fear and where our fears come from and how to overcome them. That it is ultimately okay to embrace the mess, sort of to wallow in the mess. So if you put all that together, what you come away with then is a willingness to not run away from your demons anymore. I read a great piece, I don't remember the context of it anymore, it was written by a nun who talked about having tea with her demons. Sitting there, calling them up, giving them a name, very Old Testament, name it, you own it, getting to know them and who they are in your life, because we tend to want to push them away and to get rid of them. Bottom line is, you can't.
Yeah.
They are on the journey with us. They're part of who we are, and they can be, sort of our own guardian angels once you transform your perception of them. So it frees you all up to be a little bit more at ease with yourself and willing to understand God's purpose in your life. But again, most importantly is, what am I doing in God's world? I know I've sort of been all over the map, but if someone came to me for the first time, I'd probably share that story with them. So let's go back a little bit to training. So there are a lot of spiritual directors, lots of them.
Yeah.
And are they all good? My answer to that is there are lots of spiritual directors. Are they all certified? No. Is a certified person better than an uncertified person? Probably not. Are all clergy good spiritual directors? No. You know, so if someone's looking for a spiritual director, I think what's important is it's okay not to know what you're getting yourself into, because it is, I guess. But to go, it's like anything else. If you were picking a sponsor, you know, in AA, if you were looking for a therapist, you'd interview people. You'd get a sense of who they are. And on the one hand, you want to be comfortable with them, but I think it's also really beneficial to feel really challenged by them and maybe a little bit uncomfortable. I prefer to be a little bit uncomfortable, because if I'm too comfortable with you, then in my own crazy head, I think I can manipulate you. And I know I can certainly manipulate myself into thinking that. So it doesn't serve any purpose. So the first few sessions are always all about, let's just kind of get to know each other.
Right. And then you'll know if it's the right.
You'll get a sense.
You'll get a sense of whether
exactly. And
this person is going to be able to move you.
Yeah. And
somewhere.
then you can, you know, and then you can move on, and it's just like, you know, I tell people, commit to it. Once you find a person you're comfortable with, commit to it for a couple months. Don't jump to any conclusions. Just play it all out and see how it is. Because what you think initially, you know, it's like dating, you know. Go on a few dates before you really make a decision about whether or not you want to make a commitment to this person.
I really have to watch that myself, because I'm a J, and I tend to go, I'm very quick with decisions sometimes, so I have to force myself to, okay, just see how it's going.
And there's a lot of J in me, and the other part of J in me is judgmental. So
I'm not that judgmental, but I tend to make
myself sometimes
very quick decision.
Yeah, it's important.
You know, because I can pretty much sense someone. I'm very good at sizing people right up. I kind of know, but I have to give myself permission to not do that.
Yeah, because you don't want to size someone up who's going to give you what you want. You want to size somebody up that's going to take you to a place that you need to be.
Yeah.
The way I trained is, you know, there's a lot of good places to do it. I did it locally here at Still Point.
Oh, you went through Still Point?
I did the Still Point program for 2 years, and it was really beneficial. The practicum work was what was really, really important. Working with people who were established spiritual directors was really good for me. Being with other people who are trying to figure themselves out too in this process is always very positive, and you know, so that helped a whole lot. It's a 2-year program, a lot of interesting reading, and at the end of it, you know, you're certified, whatever that means. And, you know, off you go. Now, for a while, I belonged to the International Association of Deacons, not deacons, spiritual directors. I'm thinking about the American Association of Deacons. But listen, and I stopped doing all of that because at first I was gung-ho. You know, I had all this knowledge. I am who I am. I'm going to go out and I'm going to change the world and all of that. And then I got to myself, that's not what this is really all about. And that's not what God's purpose for me in all of this is. So I don't actively go out and pursue people. Some people know I'm a spiritual director.
Right.
They make contact. And this is, you know, if someone says to me, can you recommend someone? My preference is rather than me recommend a particular person, I will tell you to go through Still Point or something like that. That's their job.
Yeah.
So let them do their job, kind of thing. People just sort of come to me, you know, and it's interesting because I think the work, sometimes you think it could, well, sometimes it could be a long process. Other times it may be 2 or 3 sessions, and wherever that person is, they've moved on to the next place, and that's fine. That's fine. You know, my ego is not that big that I'm that invested in. It's about me, and I know the way. It's not, you know. The other important thing about spiritual direction is, and I think that people, when they're looking for a spiritual director, really need to get a sense of that the person that they're working with is getting as much from them as you are from them.
I've heard that from every spiritual director I've had.
It is, you know, it is a shared process.
Yeah.
You know, it is so important. I mean, I'm convinced that I probably learn more from people that I've worked with than they've learned from me, you know? And it's a wonderful thing. I mean, to see the Spirit work, you know? I don't really spend a whole lot of time preparing for a session, because then I get too caught up in, it becomes me and not necessarily the Spirit. I try, you know, I love to talk, so I really try not to say very much, but, you know, and listen, because listening is really, really an important piece of it. Another important piece of it as a spiritual director and a pitfall is where, and this question comes up all the time, there's a fine line between this kind of work and this discipline and psychology.
Now that's right, you mentioned that before, and I wanted to let you go and didn't. So I wonder, do you have that line? Because the first thing you read when you, like every spiritual director I've contacted, you get the questionnaire of what do you want, and it seems to be a standard form that they all say spiritual direction is not therapy. True?
True.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
It's true. It's not therapy. In that sense.
in that sense.
It is therapy in terms of working on your relationship with God.
And yourself?
And yourself,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
What's your experience been with spiritual direction?
I've always had positive ones. I really enjoyed it. I never left a spiritual director. They left me. They, well, they moved or something, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I do remember that when I was told to find a spiritual director, no one told me anything. And so they said, call this number. I think it was in Orange County. That's where I lived.
Sisters of St. Joseph do a whole lot of really, really
Yeah, I think that's where I called.
Orange.
And they just gave me a bunch of phone numbers. And I went down the list. So the first place I called, no one was there, and the answer machine came on, and there was no voice, no hello, this is so-and-so. I can't, it was birds chirping.
How new age.
And I went, no. I know, that was, so, but that was my first impression. I was like, oh, what am I in for here? And because at that point I knew nothing of the diaconate, and I was looking at it, I found a deacon who was a spiritual director, so I chose Vern as my first spiritual director, and I think it was good. That was good for that time. And she was a woman. My next one was a man, so it just sort of happened that way.
Yeah, you know, yeah, and that's the best way, is let it just happen. I think it's also okay to go for periods of time where you don't have a spiritual director. I have gone through those periods because I need to walk by myself now.
Right. I've been without, and in fact, I called Still Point, and your name was on the list. Yes. But of course, we know each other, and that's so we would never do that. So I'm in the process again of trying to look around for people, and I haven't found one yet.
Yeah, it's all about.
Do you see a spiritual director monthly? That was one question I was going to ask. How often do you meet people? Generally,
I tend to meet them, you know, monthly.
Monthly, that's what I did.
Yeah, and you know, I tend to try and keep it the same time each month. It makes life easier for everybody.
Do you meet at the same place?
Sometimes. Yeah. I don't like to make it a movable feast. Life gets too complicated.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will often. Sometimes, at my parish, I'll have someone come. It depends on where they're located and what the situation is. Mm-hmm. I won't necessarily have, if they're local, I live in Highland Park, South Pass, so that's not too bad going up to Sierra Madre. But other times, I'll go to wherever.
Oh, really?
Sometimes.
You don't have a sacred space where you meet?
No. Someone asked me about that.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
And my answer to that is, isn't all space sacred?
You're right. but you've got to have some privacy at least.
Yeah. I'm not going to go do it. Although, I've done it out in the park too. So,
Really?
Yeah, outdoors.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are exceptions. But yeah, it needs to be a sacred space. But my attitude, like I just said, is all space is sacred. And what makes that space sacred is recognizing that it is sacred.
Yeah.
And respecting it.
Yeah. And God works that way.
There's another question that comes up. What is the difference between pastoral care and spiritual direction? So I'm going to ask you that.
I'm trying to answer that. I don't see much of a difference. Because at least for me, I have been talking to someone either about troubles or someone has been sharing something about their family. And then I will say, well, I know you're saying this, but I think the reality is that. And then all of a sudden their mouth drops and they sit there and a light bulb goes off, and we'll go in that direction, or we won't. Sometimes we won't. That's almost very similar to spiritual direction. So I don't know. It depends on the person too.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. So since I go back and forth between both worlds,
Yeah.
I find that pastoral care is one of two things. It's either someone asking me a question about somebody else,
Yeah.
which is fine, and that's a good thing. My son is drinking too much, blah, 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 whatever. Or it's their issue, but it's what's driving this is this one issue. And they're looking for something very, very specific and how to get to the next place. They're not really looking at the long-term kind of thing. It's not so much about my relationship with God. Well, it may be, but it's not so much about the long-term thing. It's about right now. There's an immediate. I'm in crisis right now.
Right.
Right now.
Yeah.
So how do I do this kind of thing? Because I have recommended people to spiritual direction via pastoral care. I will not obviously see any of my parishioners.
Yeah.
I will not do it. It's just not ethical.
Yeah.
Although I guess it's not ethical. I don't know. I'm not going there. It's interesting too when we talk about working with other people, we've talked about pastoral care and this type of thing. So I learned early on in sobriety that I do not sponsor people. And I'll tell you why. Because it always ended up the same way. It went right into spiritual direction. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a whole lot more to it than spiritual direction.
Yeah.
So what I do now is I will work with people in recovery, but I'll work with you specifically on your third step, and I'll work with you at the end of it. In terms of your 11th step and where do you go from there kind of thing. That I will do, and that to me is spiritual direction. But I can't walk you through all the steps. I just my partner Chris is great at that, and he's wonderful with working with other people like that. But that's just
I could never be a sponsor.
No,
I just don't have that gift.
Yeah, and it is, it is an absolute gift.
Yeah,
so.
but I have no trouble talking about my sobriety or the fact that I'm alcoholic. I've done that in church countless times.
Yeah, and I think it's important.
Oh, it is, and same with you. Afterwards, I'll get some conversations.
Yeah, I write about it in a monthly newsletter. I write about all of these things, and it's just like I decided a while ago that it needs to always sort of have a tagline. So it's called Real Faith and Real Life. At that intersection, because it's really always very, very messy there.
Yeah.
So and I'll talk about these things. I did a whole couple of pieces about sobriety, and it helped a whole lot of people to really understand what the whole process of what being a caretaker is all about, and an enabler. All of these things, tough love, and there's a lot of things. But I try very much in terms of my own preaching is to always tie all of this stuff, into the gospel. How does the gospel play out in the real world? I don't know if you saw, they handed out these buttons at General Convention. Debbie.
Oh, I wasn't there.
I wasn't there either. Somebody brought it back. Anyway. I did enough of those. But anyway, it brought us back, and it says it's Association of Episcopal Deacons, and it says shocking the congregation into action. So I don't wear it, but I wore it for a while. I said, see, commission, commission.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our chat. I know I enjoyed putting it together, and I have to tell you that this is still not all of what we talked about, but I'm only going to post 2 parts to this conversation. And I hope you find out that spiritual direction is crucial, or can be a crucial tool for what Richard Rohr talks about in his book, Falling Upward, about reaching the goal of that second half of life, walking into spiritual maturity. Spiritual direction can certainly help you with that process. And it's not something just for clergy. It's for anyone who wishes to dig into depth about what faith means for you and the world and the people around you. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next month. May I please express my gratitude at this time of year for my people who are subscribed to this channel, and I hope you invite friends to watch these videos and have them subscribe as well. And also, don't forget to subscribe and like. That helps us with this channel as well. Happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you next month as we continue with That Deacon on YouTube. Bye-bye. See you next time.